Hi guys, please like and subscribe, and also share this video to your friends and family, and also tell me about the upcoming story. Hope you enjoyed.
January 1997 was a month etched in my memory with shadows and whispers. The old Greenwood storage shed had stood abandoned at the edge of our sprawling property for as long as I could remember, its presence a silent sentinel among the frost-bitten cherry trees that marked the boundary between our home and the encroaching wilderness. My parents had moved into the house just a year before, seeking solace from the chaos of city life, unaware that the serenity they sought was intertwined with the mysteries hidden within the shed's decaying walls. I was 12 then, old enough to sense the unease that lingered around the shed, but too young to fully grasp its significance. My mother had always been meticulous, her fingers deftly arranging every item in our home with care. Her insistence on retrieving her old belongings from the shed was unusual, especially since she rarely spoke of her past. "It's important," she had told me on a chilly December evening, her eyes distant as if recalling memories best left untouched. Reluctantly, I agreed to help, unaware of the events that would unfold. The first snow had just begun to fall, coating the ground in a pristine white blanket that muffled the usual sounds of our bustling household. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of pine and the promise of winter's embrace. I wrapped my scarf tightly around my neck, feeling the chill seep into my bones as I approached the shed. The door, heavy and creaking, resisted my attempts to open it, its hinges groaning in protest. With a final push, the door gave way, revealing the dim interior shrouded in darkness. Stepping inside, I was greeted by a musty odor, a blend of damp wood and forgotten memories. Dust particles danced in the beam of my flashlight, casting eerie patterns on the walls lined with shelves burdened by the weight of time. The single bulb hanging from the ceiling flickered intermittently, its light barely penetrating the gloom. My heart pounded in my chest as I navigated the narrow aisles, searching for the box my mother had mentioned. "Over there," she had said, pointing to a corner obscured by stacked crates and old furniture. I moved cautiously, each step echoing unnervingly in the confined space. As I reached the designated spot, my flashlight landed on an old trunk, its leather surface cracked and worn. The brass clasps were tarnished, but the lock remained intact, as if guarding the secrets within. My fingers trembled as I lifted the lid, the hinges protesting with a creak that seemed to reverberate through the silent shed. Inside, the trunk was a repository of memories, faded photographs, delicate jewelry, and a journal bound in cracked leather. I carefully lifted the photograph, revealing two boys standing proudly in front of a house much like ours, though older and more imposing. Their smiles were genuine, yet something in their eyes sent a shiver down my spine. I set the photo aside, turning my attention to the journal. The handwriting was elegant, flowing across the pages with a grace that belied the years that had passed since its creation. January 5th, 1997. The nights grow colder, and the shadows seem to lengthen with each passing day. They keep asking about the room, insisting there's something there. I told them it's just a shed, nothing more. But they don't believe me. There's an unease that lingers, a presence that feels almost hungry. My heart raced as I read the entry, the words resonating with a fear I couldn't quite understand. Another entry followed, dated 3 days later. January 8th, 1997. The shadows are alive when I'm not watching. Whispers fill the air, indistinct but persistent. The boys from the photograph, they don't listen. They venture too close to the corner, and I fear what they might find. It's waiting, always waiting. A chill ran down my spine as I absorbed the ominous words. The shed, once a mere repository of forgotten items, now seemed to pulse with an unsettling energy. I glanced around, feeling the weight of unseen eyes watching my every move. Determined to uncover the truth, I delved deeper into the trunk, pulling out more items that hinted at a story untold. Among the relics was a small, intricately carved wooden box. Its surface was adorned with symbols that seemed to shift and change when viewed from different angles. I opened it to find a collection of old keys, each one unique, and a folded piece of parchment that appeared brittle with age. Unfolding it, I discovered a hand-drawn map of the property, marking the shed and several other locations with cryptic annotations. As I studied the map, a sudden noise made me jump. A soft, almost imperceptible whisper that seemed to emanate from the shadows themselves. I swung my flashlight towards the source, but saw nothing. The temperature in the shed seemed to drop, my breath visible in the frigid air. My instinct screamed at me to leave, but curiosity anchored me to the spot. Determined to understand the journal's warnings, I decided to investigate further. The map suggested there were other points of interest around the property, areas I had never explored. That night, armed with the journal and the map, I set out to uncover the truth behind the whispers and shadows that plagued our home. The moon was a thin crescent, casting a silvery light over the landscape. I followed the map's directions, my footsteps crunching on the frosted ground as I made my way to the first marked location, a large, gnarled oak tree at the far end of the property. The tree stood sentinel, its branches twisting like skeletal fingers reaching towards the sky. Beneath it, a small stone cairn marked a hidden entrance, covered by overgrown ivy and moss. Pushing aside the vegetation, I revealed a narrow passage leading underground. My heart pounded as I descended the steps, the air growing colder and more oppressive with each level. The passageway opened into a vast cavern, illuminated by a faint, ethereal glow that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. The atmosphere was thick with an otherworldly presence, the silence broken only by the distant drip of water. In the center of the cavern stood a stone altar, its surface etched with the same symbols found on the wooden box. Surrounding it were the remnants of old rituals, burnt candles, charred remains of offerings, and a circle of stones arranged meticulously around the altar. The air was heavy with the scent of incense and something more primal, something that stirred the depths of my fear. As I approached the altar, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. Shapes began to form in the corners of my vision, fleeting glimpses of figures moving just beyond the reach of light. My mind raced, piecing together the fragmented entries of the journal with the eerie sights before me. It became clear that the shed was not just a storage space, but a focal point for something much darker, something that thrived in the shadows and fed on fear. The journal entries hinted at a presence that was hungry, a force that seemed to linger in the shed and extend its reach beyond. The boys in the photograph were likely victims, drawn to the shed by curiosity or ignorance, only to fall prey to the malevolent energy that dwelled within. My determination to uncover the truth was now tinged with a personal stake. I couldn't allow more innocent lives to be claimed by whatever lurked in the darkness. I examined the altar closely, noting the intricate patterns and the symbols that mirrored those on the keys and the map. It was a language I didn't recognize, yet it spoke volumes about the rituals performed here. The air shimmered around me as the whispers coalesced into coherent words, echoing in the cavern like a haunting melody. The cycle continues. The shadows hunger. They wait for the next soul to awaken them. A surge of adrenaline pushed me to act. If this was a place of power, then disrupting the ritual might sever the connection between the living and the shadows. I remembered the keys from the wooden box, each one unique and potentially significant. Searching through the trunk again, I found a key that matched one of the symbols on the altar. It was an ornate silver key with intricate engravings that seemed to pulsate with energy. With trembling hands, I inserted the key into a hidden lock on the altar's base. A mechanism clicked, and the ground beneath me began to tremble. The ethereal glow intensified, and the shadows coalesced into tangible forms, ghostly apparitions that twisted and writhed in the air, their eyes hollow and pleading. The whispers turned into anguished cries, the cavern vibrating with their torment. I knew what I had to do. The map had hinted at other locations, places where the presence had extended its reach. By severing the connections at each point, I could weaken its hold. But first, I had to contain it here, in the heart of the shed. The key seemed to resonate with the altar, channeling its energy into a containment spell that the journal had alluded to, but never fully explained. As I held the key aloft, chanting the words I had painstakingly transcribed from the journal, the apparitions began to wane, their cries fading into silence. The cavern's oppressive atmosphere lifted slightly, though the shadows still lingered, held in check by the spell I had cast. Exhausted but resolute, I knew this was just the beginning. The shed was a nexus of darkness, but with each step I took to dismantle its power, I reclaimed a piece of our home's peace. Over the following weeks, I followed the map to each marked location, performing similar rituals to sever the ties between our world and the shadows that sought to invade it. Each encounter left me more drained, but also more determined. The townsfolk whispered about strange occurrences around our property, but I remained steadfast, knowing that my actions were the key to ending the cycle of fear and loss that had haunted our family for so long. One evening, as I was returning from another ritual site, I noticed a change in the air. The oppressive weight that had been gradually lifting was now gone, replaced by a sense of calm and closure. The final location on the map led me back to the shed, now silent and still, as if the darkness had been fully contained. The single bulb overhead no longer flickered ominously, but burned steadily, casting a warm and reassuring light. Inside, the trunk was empty, save for the journal and a single pristine key. I realized then that the presence had been bound to the physical objects within the shed, and by disrupting each one, I had freed it from our world. The boys in the photograph no longer haunted my thoughts, their hollow eyes now reflecting a sense of peace. As I stood there, the whispers ceased entirely, replaced by the gentle rustle of the cherry trees outside. The shed no longer felt like a place of fear, but rather a reminder of the resilience it took to confront the unknown. My mother's voice echoed in my mind, her instructions now clear and purposeful. Sometimes, to find peace, we must face our deepest fears and confront the shadows that linger within. Looking out through the narrow window, I saw the first signs of spring thawing the winter's grip. The snow had melted in parts, revealing the vibrant greens beneath, symbolizing new beginnings and the triumph over darkness. Our home felt different, lighter, as if a burden had been lifted. I knew that the memories of that January would always remain, but they no longer held power over me. Instead, they served as a testament to the strength we possess when we confront the unknown with courage and determination. Years later, I still think about that winter, the rituals, and the shadows that once threatened to consume us. The shed remains a part of our history, a silent witness to the battles fought and won. Whenever I pass by it, I feel a sense of closure, knowing that the darkness has been contained and that our family can finally move forward without the lingering fear of the past. In the quiet moments, when the wind rustles the leaves of the cherry trees, I can almost hear the whispers fading into silence, replaced by the harmonious sounds of life reborn. The forgotten shed, once a place of dread, now stands as a symbol of resilience and the enduring human spirit, forever a part of our story but no longer the keeper of our fears. The wind howled outside as I stood before the dilapidated house at the end of Maple Street, its silhouette stark against the overcast sky. It had been years since I last set eyes on it, years filled with echoes of laughter and screams that still haunted my dreams. My parents had abandoned it shortly after my 8th birthday, unable to bear the weight of the darkness that seemed to seep from its very foundations. Now, standing alone in the biting cold, I felt an inexplicable pull to return, to confront the memories I had long tried to bury. The house loomed ominously, windows boarded up, ivy crawling up its sides like the tendrils of some ancient beast. The front door hung ajar, its once vibrant paint now chipped and faded. Taking a deep breath, I pushed it open, the hinges groaning in protest. The stale, musty air hit me like a wall, carrying the scent of dampness and decay that had never truly left. Stepping inside, I was enveloped by darkness, the only light coming from the narrow slits in the boarded windows that cast long, eerie shadows across the floor. I had always dreaded the basement. As a child, it was a place of fear and mystery, filled with things I couldn't understand and horrors my young mind couldn't comprehend. The stairs to the basement were narrow and steep, each step creaking under any weight, threatening to give way at any moment. I remember the way they seemed to bend and twist, as if the very structure of the house was trying to keep the basement's secrets hidden. But that night, everything had changed. It was my 6th birthday. The house had been filled with laughter and the excited chatter of cousins and grandparents, all gathered to celebrate. My father had been particularly anxious that day, fussing over the front door handle that had stubbornly jammed weeks before. "It's nothing to worry about," he'd said, his hands trembling as he tried to fix it. But I could see the frustration etched into his face, a silent plea for everything to be perfect. He had sent me down to the basement to retrieve his black toolbox, a ritual that had become all too familiar. Every year, without fail, he'd send me to the basement with some trivial request, masking his deeper fears with mundane tasks. That night, though, something felt different. As I descended the stairs, the air grew colder, the darkness thicker, and the oppressive silence more pronounced. My heart pounded in my chest, each step echoing ominously around me. The basement was a maze of forgotten items, old furniture covered in dusty sheets, boxes stacked haphazardly, and broken tools scattered across the floor. But what stood out most was the single, flickering bulb hanging from the ceiling, its pale yellow light casting unsettling shadows that danced along the walls. It swung gently with each of my steps, the light playing tricks on my eyes, making the space feel both infinite and claustrophobic at the same time. I reached for the toolbox, my fingers trembling as I lifted the lid. Inside were the usual tools, screwdrivers, wrenches, and a hammer. But beneath them lay a photograph, faded and brittle with age. It was a picture of my best friend, Ethan, and me, taken just a year before. We were laughing, carefree, oblivious to the darkness that was about to consume us both. Ethan had been my closest companion, the one person who understood my fears and shared in my nightmares. Together, we had explored the depths of the basement, our imaginations turning it into a playground of endless possibilities. But that night, our games had taken a sinister turn. As we played near the far corner of the basement, the air had grown inexplicably cold, and shadows seemed to move of their own accord. Ethan had insisted we stay away from the corner, but curiosity had gotten the better of us. And then, the screams. I remember the sound vividly. Ethan's voice, pure terror, echoing through the basement as something unseen dragged him into the darkness. I had tried to save him, but my small hands were no match for whatever force had taken him. The basement had become a place of horror, a living nightmare that my parents couldn't comprehend. They had blamed me for Ethan's disappearance, telling me it was just my imagination running wild. But I knew the truth. Years passed, but the memories never faded. My parents left soon after, unable to cope with the fear and guilt that had taken root in their hearts. I stayed behind, the basement becoming both my sanctuary and my prison. I avoided the stairs, the memories too painful to confront, but they lingered in the corners of my mind, whispers in the dark. Now, at 32, those memories had resurfaced with a vengeance. The nightmares had become more vivid, the shadows more menacing. I couldn't escape the feeling that the basement was calling to me, that the darkness still held a grip on my soul. Determined to find closure, I decided to return, to face the horrors that had shaped my childhood and left me broken. The night I returned was unlike any other. The wind howled outside, and the sky was a blanket of dark clouds, hiding the moon and stars from view. As I approached the house, I felt a chill run down my spine, the same oppressive weight that had haunted me for years. Taking a deep breath, I pushed open the front door, the familiar scent of dampness and decay welcoming me back. I made my way to the basement, the stairs creaking under my weight, each step a reminder of the fear I had tried to leave behind. The basement door swung open, revealing the same cluttered space, now even more foreboding than I remembered. The single bulb overhead flickered erratically, casting long, sinister shadows that seemed to writhe and twist on their own. I reached for the toolbox once more, but this time it was gone. In its place was a single old key, hanging from a rusty hook on the wall. Confused, I picked it up, feeling a surge of energy course through me. The basement seemed to respond, the shadows growing darker, the air thick with an unspoken menace. My heart raced as I realized that the darkness had not been contained. It had been waiting, growing stronger with each passing year. Desperate for answers, I searched the basement, finding nothing but the same old items that had once been a playground for my imagination. But as I turned to leave, a cold hand grabbed my shoulder, pulling me back into the darkness. I struggled, trying to free myself, but the grip was unrelenting, pulling me deeper into the abyss. The shadows seemed to come alive, their tendrils wrapping around me, squeezing the life out of me. In the midst of the struggle, a familiar face appeared before me, Ethan's pale, lifeless eyes staring back at me. His mouth opened in a silent scream, rows of sharp teeth glistening in the dim light. Panic surged through me as I realized that the basement was no longer just a room. It was a gateway to something beyond our understanding, a place where darkness thrived and innocence was lost. Summoning every ounce of courage, I reached for the key, holding it tightly in my hand. The shadows recoiled, sensing the power within the key, and the oppressive atmosphere began to lift. I chanted the words I had remembered from years of nightmares, the incantations that my mother had whispered in her desperation to save me. The shadows screamed, their forms twisting and contorting as they were forced back into the darkness. With a final surge of energy, the basement was plunged into complete darkness, the key glowing with a brilliant light that banished the shadows once and for all. I collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath, the oppressive weight lifted from my shoulders. Ethan's spirit appeared one last time, his eyes now filled with peace, before fading away into the light. Exhausted but victorious, I knew that the basement had been defeated, but the scars would remain. The house stood silent, a testament to the battles fought within its walls. As I ascended the stairs, the weight of the past lifted, replaced by a sense of closure and hope. The darkness had been confronted and overcome, and I could finally move forward, free from the shadows that had haunted me for so long. Leaving the house behind, I felt a sense of liberation wash over me. The nightmares had ceased, the shadows no longer held power over me. I knew that the memories of that January would always be a part of me, but they no longer defined me. Instead, they served as a reminder of the strength it took to confront the unknown and the resilience of the human spirit. Years later, the house at the end of Maple Street had been torn down, replaced by a vibrant garden that symbolized new beginnings. The land was now a place of peace, untouched by the horrors of the past. I often thought about that night, the courage it took to face the darkness, and the peace I had found in the aftermath. The shadows of January 2024 had been dispelled, but their echoes remained, a testament to the enduring power of hope and the triumph of light over darkness. Revisiting the events of that night, I realized that the basement had been more than just a place of fear. It had been a crucible that forged my resilience and shaped who I had become. The rituals I performed were not just acts of defiance against the darkness, but steps towards healing and understanding the depths of human fear and courage. I decided to document my experiences, sharing my story with others who might find themselves facing their own shadows. Through writing and speaking, I hope to provide a beacon of hope for those who felt trapped by their fears, showing them that even in the darkest of places, light can prevail. As I moved forward with my life, the lessons learned in that basement guided me. I pursued a career in psychology, helping others confront and overcome their own traumas. The house at the end of Maple Street became a distant memory, its legacy transformed from a place of horror to a symbol of personal triumph. In the quiet moments when the wind whispers through the trees and the world feels still, I can almost hear the echoes of that night, a reminder that even when faced with the unimaginable, the strength to overcome resides within us all. The shadows of January 2024 are gone, but their lessons remain, illuminating the path towards a brighter, more resilient future.